Okay, first thing we're going to do is to prepare the potatoes. So what I'd like you to do is to half fill a large pan with water and get it onto the heat. And we want to bring that pan up to the boil. So if you wanted to add a bit of salt to the water, you could. But we're just going to leave that water coming up to the boil. Keep half an eye on it while you prepare your potatoes. Now you need to think about how many potatoes you're going to need. I'm wanting enough potato to cover this. This is what I'm going to make my cottage pie in, and I'm going to need enough potato to cover the top. I've already peeled a few of them, so I'm just going to show you this one. So just peeling round on the curve. Potatoes are a bit more awkward than carrots to prepare, to be honest. And you might stumble across a few brown patches, a few bruises. If you do, don't worry about it. You can just cut them out. Sometimes you can just peel over for a second time and it will come off. But if you've got a bigger bruise, just cut it out with your knife. Now, the most important thing about chopping your potatoes once they're peeled is making sure all of your potatoes are exactly the same size. That is because if I were to cut and put some pieces in the boiling water that are that big and some pieces that are that big, this one is going to cook in about 10 minutes and then start to disintegrate in the water. That one is still going to be raw in the middle. And if you try and mash a raw potato, you'll have lumps of raw potato in your mash, which is not very nice. So decide on a size and make sure all of the pieces are the same size. If you want them all that size, that's fine. For speed, I would normally cut my potatoes into sort of 2 to 3 centimetre cubes, something along those lines. So you'll need to take each potato and try and achieve equal size pieces. Once the water's boiling, we'll add the potatoes into the water, set a timer for takes about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the size of your potatoes. But we'll go back to that and have a look. Here is my carrot. So just hold it one end, peel the skin off. You can leave the skin on if you like, but if you're going to do that, you'll need to give it a wash to get the soil off. Let's get rid of all of that. Cut the ends off. You could grate it if you wanted to, but I'm going to dice mine up. So I'm going to cut the thicker end, I'm going to cut into 3. The thinner end, I'm going to cut in half. Put the flat sides down on the board. Cut them in half again. And then we can put them all side by side. You should be getting quite good with your chopping now. You should be able to manage to cut a few at a time. Dice them up. Want them fairly small. Carrot can take quite a long time to cook in a cottage pie, so you don't want huge pieces in there. You could put mushrooms in a cottage pie and just slice them up. Some people like to put some peas in, that's fine. Whatever takes your fancy. And then I'm just going to pop that to one side out of the way so my board's free to prepare my onion. So that's the way the onion grows in the ground. That's the roots, that's the top. Cut the top off. Then put the flat side down on the board using a bridge hole to cut it in half through the middle of the roots. Peel the skin off. And then take each side in turn and slice along the lines which go down the onion. You can do that either with the onion facing up like this, if it's stable enough. You can see the little lines, about ½ centimetre apart, a couple of millimetres apart. If it's a little bit wobbly, you can just place it down on the board and cut it like this. But the idea is that we're keeping the roots attached at all times. Once we've gone all the way around then, we're ready to start slicing it this way, and then that's going to cut it into a nice fine dice. The water's come up to the boil. We're going to pop our potatoes into the water. Mine are already in, as you can see. Try not to drop them from a great height because the water will splash. You just need to put them quite close to the water. And then you're aiming to bring the water back up to the boil because the cold potatoes will stop the boiling. So this is just starting to come back up to the boil now. Once it is up to the boil, I'll just drop the heat down onto a medium heat so that simmers gently for for about 15 to 20 minutes. So my potatoes have been cooking about 15 minutes. They're cut quite small, mine, so that should be enough. If I overcook them, then they're going to end up falling apart. And if they're undercooked, then we're going to end up with lumps. Now the way that I check them is to look for the biggest piece that you can see in the pan and just stick a knife into it. If it feels like it's the same sort of texture all the way through, then you know it's cooked. If it feels like it's still a little bit hard in the middle, then you can leave them to cook for a few more minutes. Once you're confident the potatoes are cooked all the way through, you're going to take your colander over to the sink and then using both hands to carry the saucepan, you're going to drain those out into the colander. Once all the liquids, all of the waters drained down the sink, we're going to put the potatoes back into the saucepan. We're going to add a little drop of milk and some butter, just a little knob of butter, and then we're going to use a masher to mash that completely smooth. About a tablespoon of butter, a couple of tablespoons of milk. Depending on the variety of your potato will depend how much milk that you need. Some potatoes are much drier than others. So I would start mashing and see how you go. This is ready now. The masher just goes through it easily. I've gone through it lots of times so that I've got rid of all of the lumps in there. So I'm just going to pop that to one side to cool down. It's particularly important to have the potato cool before we pipe it, if you're going to use a piping bag to put the potato on. Next part of the method then is to make the meat part for underneath. So in the pan I've put my chopped onion and my beef mince. You could use lamb mince if you're making a shepherd's pie. For cottage pie it's beef. And we want to pop quite a high heat on this. And what we're going to do is use a wooden spoon just to break the meat up, and it will gradually start to brown and the onions will soften. If anything starts to stick to the bottom of the pan, just turn down the heat. But keep it all moving until it's nice and browning. I've just come over here and I've put my stock cube into my jug and then filled it up to about 200 ml with some boiling water from the kettle. And I'm just going to give that a stir until the stock cube is dissolved, and we can just pop that to one side ready for update. I'm just having a look to see how this is going. You can see that some of the mince is starting to turn brown, some of it's still pink, so we know it's not ready. But it's not sticking, it's not making lots of noise, there's no sticking of the meat onto the pan or anything, so it's a good heat that we've got here. We're going to keep going until all of that pink meat is gone. All of the mince is brown, so what we're going to do next is to add a tablespoon of plain flour into the mixture. This is going to thicken the gravy, as it were. So we'll stir all of that in, so it's all disappeared. And then we're going to pour in the stock that we made. Pour all of that in and give it a stir, and that flour should thicken the stock up to make a nice thick gravy. Lastly, I'm going to add in my carrots. I can always add a little bit more liquid if I think it's too thin. I think this is a little bit too dry, so I'll add a little bit more liquid. And then I'm just going to pop it onto a simmer for about 20 minutes. Water that's in there now, I do have to add another 100 mils or so. Just brought it back up to the boil, and then I'm going to drop it down onto a nice low simmer. I can put the lid on that and set the timer for 20 minutes. The key thing really is to make sure those carrots are cooked and that the heat has destroyed all the bacteria in the meat. It's been cooking for about 20 minutes now. I have just checked one of the largest pieces of carrot, and I felt that it was a little bit on the firm side still. And there's also a little bit more liquid than I would like at this stage. So I'm going to give it another 5 minutes of cooking with the lid off. The reason being there is you can lose some of the moisture through evaporation and get the gravy a little bit. I'm really happy with the consistency of this now. It's not too runny, it's not too dry. So I've poured it out into my oven-proof dish, and I've just spread it out with my wooden spoon so it's nice and even. The next part then is to really carefully take small amounts of the potato and spread it over the top. So I'm just going to put a little bits all over, and I'm trying to do it one-handed, so apologies for that. And then we'll have another look at it once I've managed to get it all the way. Quite a thin layer of the potato now all over the dish. It's important not to just put loads of big blobs of it, because if it's quite heavy then it will sink into the beef. And then what you're going to do is carefully spread it out with the fork, so that you're spreading it to cover all of the meat. And what the fork also does is you can use the fork there to fork in quite a nice pattern when you finish with it. The alternative is to use a piping bag. and fill your piping bag with the potato, and then you can pipe it on into a really nice pattern. Spread all of the potato over the top now and use the fork, being careful not to press too hard and push it all down into the beef. Now I'm just going to pop this into the oven and I'm just going to cook it through until it's nice and golden brown on the top. Should take about 20 minutes on quite a high heat. I'm going to put it on a gas mark 6 or a 190. Okay, so what I ended up doing in the end was bringing the cottage pie home. Instead of cooking it in school, I cooked it at home. It's been in the oven for about 35 minutes on a gas mark 6. So it's nice and golden and crunchy on the top. I'm just going to serve that with some peas and a bit of gravy. Enjoy!